The Enslavers. From the dark reaches of the past, a deadly threat still lingers, lurking on the edges of reality, waiting to push through. They are of the immaterium, the warp, yet they are a foe that predates even the dark gods of chaos. They are the first enemy, the first foul beings of the warp, and they are eternally hungry. They are some of the oldest beings in the universe, the most dire of all threats, for they were born in the most vicious and terrible of all wars, the first war, the war in heaven. They have been hailed by many names: the Krell, the Sirens, the Dominators, and the Puppeteers. But most often, they are merely called the Enslavers. Theirs is a dark genesis, for unlike most of the weapons and evils of that age, they are still fully active, just not to the extent that they were then. For according to the lore of this setting, this grim darkness of the far future, if there was any one factor that led to the defeat of the Old Ones, the creators of the Eldar, the Krork, Knib, Rashan, Jakero, and even, some say, humanity, then surely it would be the Enslavers. The Old Ones were a power unlike anything that now exists, for they were architects of not only genetics and terraforming, but of the science of the soul itself. They were the most skilled and mighty of all of the psycho races that have ever existed, and it was their actions that gave birth to these entities. But what is an enslaver? How and why did they come into existence? And what do they want? Well, let us begin with how. Let us begin with their genesis. Tens of millions of years ago, the first sentient beings in the galaxy began to form. They were the Catan, evil beings of energy that slowly consumed stars. But they could not have any meaningful connection with the rest of the universe, as they had no material form. Like dark vampires, these beings sat around suns and lived from their power. Malevolent minds, invisible to near all. Then came the Old Ones, the gardeners and cultivators of new life, with a mastery over the immaterium, what is now called the warp, second to none. They could perform marvels of medicine and genetic engineering, yet their true power was in the ability to master themselves, to then turn inwards and master the power of magic around them, in the reality that was shattered and cut off from the material world. The Sea of Souls, the immaterium, was their greatest power. And they were so adept that they even created ancient citadels and a whole new realm called the Webway, a third space, just for the Old Ones. Neither of the warp nor of the materium really. It is this realm that allowed them to move from point to point in a fraction of the speed required for conventional space. They were benevolent and assisted other races to develop, to grow. They would teach any they came across. Yet they soon met their equal and opposite, the Necrontyr. Where the Old Ones taught, the Necrontyr slaughtered and subjugated. Theirs was the mastery of energy and physics and the material world, but they did not master genetics and its manipulation. And the Necrons expanded into the stars like a cancer, for they were attempting to leave their solar system as their star was cursed. Its light would twist and corrupt and blast the Necrontyr, so their lives were in constant pain. But even when they escaped their homeworld, tragedy, they found that the destruction meted out by their sun was built into their very DNA. The pain and suffering were incredible, and it made the Necrontyr pitiless and merciless to all they encountered. They wiped out worlds and civilizations that the Old Ones had attempted to assist to grow. And eventually, there could be nothing but war. For the Necrontyr were jealous of the longevity and near immortality and seemingly blessed lives of the Old Ones. So, they humbled themselves, and the Necrontyr asked the Old Ones for assistance, for the cure to their conditions. Yet the Old Ones saw the darkness in the soul of the Necrontyr and refused to give it immortality, nor even any help with their conditions, thinking that they would be empowering a force too dark to be augmented, too pitiless to be granted eternity. And so they fought. Initially, the Necrontyr were easily crushed by the Old Ones. Using this subdimension, this webway, they could harness the full strength of their fleets and meet any force of Necrontyr with an overwhelming response. Plus their powers of the Immaterium were like unto magic to the Necrontyr, inexplicable, yet unfathomably powerful. With their webway and their magic, they forced the Necrontyr back to their birth world. Their empire was gone, so the Necrontyr fell back to civil war, until they found the Catan, the Star Gods. These beings, who ate suns, were brutal and vicious entities. Yet the Necrontyr were not to know that, not then. They discovered one of them surrounding their very star as a god, and this may have been the reason the energies from it were so damaging to them. Yet they did not stop to think about the Pandora's box they would be opening. For they worked and worked until they discovered necrodermis, a phenomenally powerful and supple material, a living metal, that could house the sentiences of the Catan. And the dark and terrible Catan began to fully manifest. Their power was akin to the levels of the Old Ones, but they were alike to dark gods of the material realms. They could wink suns out of existence, devastate entire regions of space given the power. And the Necrontyr were tricked by these malicious things. They lost their souls and were transformed into the horrors now known as the Necrons. Immortal, as was promised, yet so much less than they were. And so, the Necrons and their Catan masters restarted the war. And the power of the Catan enhanced and engorged by the souls torn from the entire Necrontyr race. They were godlike. In the new phase of the war, the Old Ones were smashed again and again. The Old Ones then took to creating entire races of psychically gifted beings, like the Eldar and the Krork, to fight against the enemy. For the only weakness of the Catan and their Necron slaves were the powers of the warp. And so, the battle went back and forth for millions of years. Tens of them. With abilities being thrown at each other that left permanent scars in reality. And the Immaterium, that place so like a heaven of compassion and love, now turned into a place of darkness and strife, as it reflected the horrors that were being performed in real space. The war escalated again and again, and the Old Ones unleashed powers they perhaps should never have used. For the Immaterium became dark. It started its slow slide into becoming the warp. The acts of war, the emotions of rage and hate and evil, changed it. Even then, the Old Ones were able to fend off the Necrons, but that is when the last phase of the war began. For it was the birth of the Enslaver Plague. Some call them old souls, twisted by the way they ended. Some call them collected hate of the dead and dying. Some call them akin to antibodies, a realm throwing up horrors to defend itself from what is being done to it. No matter the truth of their genesis, the Enslavers shifted the balance of the war. For they appeared in vast numbers, attacking the strongholds of the Old Ones in the warp, destroying them utterly. And they managed to force their way into real space via the warp, using younger races like the Eldar and Krork, who were not powerful, prescient, or skilled enough to stop them. Some legends state that the Enslaver Plague near wiped out all sentient life in the galaxy. Some say that they were merely one of many factors in that period. But the ultimate result was that the Old Ones lost most of their power, most of their allies, and most of their places of safety. When the Catan then constructed their great Dolem gates and could force their way into the Webway dimension, it was over. The Old Ones are hunted by the Enslavers, hunted by the Necrons, and hunted by the Catan, and they were destroyed. Only one of them, Ka, seeming to survive that terrible war, and only then by hiding, forever hiding from his enemies, forever moving, until the Enslaver Plague ended and the Necrons then turned on their Catan masters and destroyed them. Yet, nothing could bring back the Old Ones. So the last of these, Ka, created just one more gift, one more race. Perhaps the one designed to heal the hurts that they had inadvertently created in their attempts to meet hate with hate. The human race. The Enslaver Plague only ended as there seemed to be so few beings left to consume. So when they ran out of meals, they either died off, as some wished to believe, or they slunk back into the warp, biding their time, until a new flowering of life could occur. A new harvest could be left to grow. But what is an enslaver? And so, for the very basics, let us lean on existing wisdom. To quote, the Enslavers. These other dimensional beings have physical forms that are unlike any other life. They seem to possess physical bodies, but appear to exist in warp space for at least a part of their life cycle, and are known to pose a terrible threat to all living creatures when in the material realm. They appear as barrel-shaped or basic spheroids that measured approximately 2 meters in height and had a tough, leathery skin. They are able to change their skin tone at will, though they are typically leathery brown. A single large sensory organ colored either red, pink, or orange, sometimes referred to as an eye, sits at the very top of the body, though its actual function is unknown. Around the upper portion of the body is a cluster of pale or white or pinkish tentacles that range between 8 to 12 in number, and that are all 1.5 meters long. Typically, 2 of these are longer than the others and end in suckered pads. The tentacles serve as a primary sensory as well as manipulative organs for the enslaver. Though they lack any legs, they do move about their environment by floating, and sometimes use their tentacles to aid them when they wish to move precisely or fast. This method allows them to move quite rapidly and allows them to change direction or speed in a manner comparable to humans or other more orthodox creatures. An enslaver can float up to 3 meters high, but are unable to actually fly, though they are able to climb. They have the ability to transcend normal space, allowing them to easily traverse the galaxy and perhaps beyond. Enslavers are able to travel through warp space by using the psychic vibrations of other creatures. The name mankind has given them stems from the fact that they are able to mentally enslave other creatures to their will. Through mental control, they are able to take over the minds of other races, with a single enslaver able to dominate the minds of up to 10 creatures. The victims of this mental control retain all their abilities, knowledges and physical attributes, though all of these are under the control of the enslaver. Victims of the enslavers become helpless and complete puppets to their alien master's will, and perform even the most self-destructive actions without hesitation, though their mental command is limited to a range of up to 50 meters. Their attraction to the minds of psychers dictates the movements of the enslavers, with the strongest and easily traced psychic emanations coming from unprotected human psychers. Such vibrations can be detected as far away as 10 light years, with them being tracked by an enslaver, where 3 of their kind often merging into a band to create a mental bond with their prey. Such victims can be unaware of this at first, but in time, gradual changes are found upon their body chemistry. They become lethargic, and their skin discolors, whereupon, in a period of 50 to 75 hours, their forms swell as body tissues disintegrate, as well as reforms into a living gate of rupturing, pulsing flesh. This becomes the end of the victim. Their body is transformed into a special form of warp gate that serves as a link between the materium and the immaterium, through which the trio of enslavers travel unrestricted. Once in the material world, they begin to enslave more psychers, including protected ones such as astropaths, who are then turned into similar gateways that permit more trios of enslavers into the materium. Mankind has been unable to determine if the enslavers are intelligent in human terms. This is because they are able to act in a rational manner and make reasonable decisions about their actions. But they have never communicated with other races, though whether this is because they are incapable of doing so or refusing to do so is unknown. In addition, they have never been observed to make use of tools or any other forms of equipment. Theoretically, an enslaver is certainly capable of using a weapon, but has never been seen to do so. Instead, manual labor or combat is conducted by their psychically dominated slaves. Enslavers are slightly larger than a grown man. However, other size ranges are possible, as the former has been the average assessment. These xenos have a sack-like body, which contract with movement and are almost completely transparent. The front is recognizable by numerous tentacles originating from the anterior end and down in the posterior along the bottom. The face of the enslaver is an almost mask-like visage, with numerous eye holes of different sizes. An enslaver also possesses the ability to phase in and out of the materium, as it manifests from a psyker. The creature possesses psychers as demons would, yet do not show any outward signs of possession, instead working clandestinely to further its own ends, ultimately being the possession of other psychers to allow the passage of more enslavers into real space. Unlike demons, enslavers can control non-psychers, which they consume the minds of, furthering their own power and allowing the control of more potential slaves. Eventually, with enough enslavers or one of extraordinary power, it may be able to even control an entire hive of humans and then spread across the planet, after which the only acceptable plan of action is exterminatus. Upon the death of a possessed psyker, the body is destroyed and the enslavers emerge, the psyker having served its purpose. Despite the virus-like actions and considerable threat the species represents to the Imperium, The Enslavers find it difficult to possess a sanctioned psyche due to the soul forging. Yet even so, if there are enough of them present, they can slowly grind down the sanctioned psyche, and they will break and be obliterated by the Enslavers. End quote. And so we see why the Enslavers were so deadly to the Eldar, who are psychic across the length and breadth of their race. But the Orcs, or Krork as they were then, are no less connected to the warp, not really, just in a far more subtle way. Hence it is easy to see how these entities could control entire regions of space, growing exponentially as they expanded into these societies on world after world. At the end of the plague, there was nothing to enslave, nobody left to eat, so they disappeared again. But was this just the warp saying, "And now you, denizens of the real world, the physical, cannot harm me anymore. You cannot taint me anymore"? Perhaps we will never know. Yet the universe is reaching a critical mass again, for the populations of the galaxy have risen mightily despite the wars, perhaps because of them. Humanity mates and blurts out population like a constant conveyor belt, and despite their losses, they are bent on covering the stars with their teeming masses. The Tau and Orcs and others are all raising their numbers as they gear up in reaction to the humans, for the Orcs at least, but also for the Tau as they drive to build an empire. And their shared wealth and technology is boosting the capacity and population of all races under their hegemony. And the arrival of the bugs, the Tyrannid. In them are massed life forms no less connected to the warp than humanity, really. They have psyches and a mind that seems to connect to one another through the warp, the hive mind. So, the universe again is changed, with all of this juicy life, so much of it being psychically attuned, so much of it calling upon the power of the warp. And do not forget that this is a new galaxy, a different set of paradigms. For the tear across its length, the Cicatrix Maledictum, has brought out the flowering power of humanity. It has made psyches of so many that would have just been latent. And with the Nemesis event, along with others, this has shown that these ancient horrors still exist. They still watch from the murky darkness, so deep in the warp, though not even the dark gods of chaos tread there. Surely, these circumstances, these events, these situations must call out into eternity, the endless dark seascape of the warp. And surely, if there was ever a time that would bring back a second plague of enslavers, it would be now. Fear. Fear for the future of the galaxy. For the darkness may come again. The first darkness. The first beings of the warp. Those things that came even before demons. Fear. For the return of the enslavers.